Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker needs no introduction. Would you please join me in welcoming the Federal Agriculture Minister, the Honourable David Littleproud.
Well, thanks, Luce. Can I acknowledge the traditional owners, the Ngunnawal people in the land in which we meet? Can I acknowledge each and every one of you for the contribution you've made to your country, particularly over the last couple of years? But in particular, can I single out the President and CEO of NFF for their leadership of Australian agriculture. And let me say how important that is, to have a strong peak body that can walk the halls of Canberra and has the currency and validity of what Fiona and Tony have been able to articulate on behalf of you. It's a great achievement because fragmentation of your representative bodies only weakens agriculture. So it's important you have a united voice, a strong voice that carries the weight of Australian agriculture. And to create a vision, a goal of $100 billion by 2030 was an ambitious one. And to think that where we've come from in just 6 years, from around $47 billion to now, for the first time in our nation's history, we will tick over $80 billion. That is an achievement in face of fire, flood, drought, cyclone, mice, and this little thing called COVID. We've done the job. We've paid the bills. We've kept the country going. And that's an acknowledgement that I think Australians have awoken to, the importance of regional rural Australia. And I acknowledge now the ambitious plan that NFF has put in front of us as an election commitment. Well, I'm not going to make election commitments and promises. We're going to act, and we acted in this year's budget. $21 billion worth of investment in regional and rural Australia. Australians have awoken to the important role that regional and rural Australia plays, and particularly agriculture plays. And that's about putting the environment and infrastructure around you and then getting the hell out of your life as quickly as we possibly can. That's about making sure we have the trade agreements. And this time, last week, free trade agreement number 16 with India. 1.3 billion people, a burgeoning middle class that you will now be able to tap into. We've had challenges with some of our trading partners. We acknowledge that, but we will never take a step back on our values and principles of this country, our democracy. Over 100,000 Australians have lost their lives defending it, and we won't trade it away. But what we will do is give you the opportunity to trade elsewhere. These trade agreements have given us the opportunity to send boats left and right, and we have. We've opened up new markets, and we've signed a free trade agreement with the UK, with Indonesia, $270 million people on our doorstep. These are the types of free trade agreements that are giving you opportunity. We're putting more boots on the ground in terms of agricultural counsellors, breaking down technical barriers, making it easier, and we're getting a digital platform for our trading system that allows you to have your own profile to engage with the Department of Agriculture so that they can tell you where you can export to simplify it, to empower you, not to be forced to sell to a couple of big supermarkets here in Australia and a big German that's come, but to give you the power to decide, to give you the opportunity to grow your wealth. And we're doing that also by protecting your brand. Over $1.1 billion worth of investment in biosecurity in the last 3 budgets done over the last 18 months. We're embracing technology and intelligence to protect you and to protect your brand. 3D X-ray scanners going over every one of the 144 million parcels that go through Australia Post, with artificial intelligence that we designed here in Australia. And now we're taking that to the world, partnering with New Zealand, so we'll know what's in your bag before you leave New Zealand. We're also making sure that we're facing up to the evolving threats that keep coming, like lumpy skin. We need industry to work with us. And we're going to have to take some bold steps, and we're going to have to continue to be agile. And that's why in the budget, a further $61 million to address this, to make sure we have greater surveillance, but also have boots on the ground in Indonesia and now already in Timor. Some of these threats will blow in, literally. And that is where we need coordination and effort between state and federal governments and industry. We all have a role to play. But we have, and the thing that I am proud of, is the fact that Tony articulated quite clearly the number of incursions that we found. that shows that $1.1 billion is working, because we're finding it. The system is starting to step up to the evolving threat because we're evolving with it. And I'm proud to say yesterday I met with the Inspector General of Biosecurity. He made it very clear that we've made the financial commitment and given the Department of Agriculture the tools to do their job for the threats that we face at the moment, and we need to continue to evolve with that. And we will move towards a cost recovery model. But unlike agriculture, there's been many industries that rely on the Department of Agriculture at our ports to bring their products in. And they haven't done it as easy as what the agriculture sector has. And so we've worked through that, and we've got them to appreciate that a cost recovery model will come to where the risk is greatest. But we need to understand that they've been going through some pretty trying times, and that we're going to phase that in a responsible way to those importers to make sure that they pay for the risk that they present to Australian agriculture and to the environment. But also in the budget, we made over $21 billion worth of infrastructure commitments, and we have identified regions of growth. We've done that also with Northern Australia, that I also lead. We have picked too many winners too far across the country. It's time to identify and prioritise. This isn't saying that those regions that we've picked in this budget don't get anything. There are many programs that they're eligible for, but this is about shifting the dial, and shifting the dial quickly. We are spending your money. This is Australian taxpayers' money that we are spending, and we must get a return on investment. And to get a return on investment, we need to shift the dial quickly in terms of de-risking investment, because it's not the good old taxpayer that has to pay for everything. We need the private sector, private capital to come in and partner with us. But by de-risking supply chains, infrastructure gaps, making sure that we get the product either from a pit or a paddock to a port or to your plate is imperative. And the quicker we do that, the more efficient we do that, the more money you make. The quicker we repay the debt, the more people we employ. Governments don't create jobs, you do. The only jobs we create, you pay for. So it's important that we put that infrastructure and we prioritise those areas of growth, those regions of growth that will accelerate our growth. They'll continue to take our economy to being the envy of the world coming out of the biggest pandemic we have seen in generations. We've got a lot to be proud of, but we've got a lot to do. $7.4 billion in water infrastructure. This has to be a partnership with the states. But you know what? We're not going to ask them to cut a cheque anymore. We're just going to ask them to approve it. Time for talk is over. The time to burn some diesel and dig some holes is now. And the Australian government is saying, we will pay it. We will de-risk those investments to build the water infrastructure that'll take this nation and take agriculture to the next level. But this isn't just about agriculture. Let me just say that by 2030, there'll be a 37% reduction in storage capacity per person per megalitre of water for you people that live in capital cities, because the population's gone up, but no one's bothered to invest in water infrastructure. So your amenity, even living in Canberra, Brisbane or Sydney or Melbourne, will be challenged by your ability to turn a tap on because they don't have the storage capacity. The time for talk is over. We've cut the cheque. It's time for the states to dig the holes. We're the first country in the world to be able to measure biodiversity. If I leave one legacy apart from the ag visa, the biodiversity stewardship program is one that I'm most proud of. No other country in the world has been able to crack the code but us, and we own this intellectual property and the rest of the world now wants it. We're going to pay farmers not just for carbon. That's a blunt instrument. That's a thing a couple of decades old now. Australians are smarter and we've moved past that. We're going to reward farmers financially, not just for carbon abatement, but we've created a voluntary market whereby they be paid for biodiversity. And we'll be launching a brand, a seal that you'll be able to put on your beef, on your wool, on your grain, on your sugar, that'll be recognised around the world. We're not waiting for the world to set the rules. We're setting them now. We're setting them with the best minds in Australia right here in creating a biodiversity stewardship program that is world-class and world-first. And it's now time for corporate Australia to step up. To step up and to actually, as part of their ESG, is to be honest to their shareholders. and be honest about where they are purchasing their carbon credits and their biodiversity certificate credits that we have created as part of our legislation. To not shirk their responsibilities, not to buy an acre of the Amazon that they can't validate, but to support Australian agriculture in a sustainable way where it doesn't take away productive landscape, but rewards farmers for the stewardship of the landscape that they need to manage, that isn't productive and isn't profitable, and gives them a passive income stream. We've done it. We're the first ones there. And it's not just the good old taxpayer that has to put liquidity into this. This is corporate Australia's opportunity to shine, to support regional Australia, but to get their social conscience where it should be, and to do it publicly and transparently. So I'm pleased to say we're ahead of the curve on that. In terms of telecommunications, there's been billions of dollars spent in telecommunications, and this budget alone, another $1.3 billion. We've spent a lot of your money on regional telecommunications. Some of the traditional providers have really vacated the space. And we shouldn't continue to put money into platforms that continue to let us down. So it's time to think differently about how we use that $1.3 billion and the more money that will come to ensure that we have the tools of the 21st century. They're going to be hard conversations with some of our traditional providers. We can regulate our way out of this, or we can get some competition. It's time for us to shift the dial in terms of telecommunications, to think differently, because if we keep doing the same thing over and over again, we'll get the same results. And this is your money that we are putting out there, and we haven't got the results. With over the 1,200 mobile phone towers that we've put up over the last 3 years, they're at risk of becoming white elephants. So it's time to think about how we do this properly into the future and how we spend your money to get a return on investment. And can I say, labour force is the biggest constraint on our industry at the moment. I'm proud to say that I never gave up on an ag visa. The National Party never gave up on an ag visa. We had to fight bloody hard for it, but we won it. And let me tell you, we put it in place on the 1st of October. It isn't capped. There's no cap program. This is a demand-driven program that you, the farmer, will decide. It complements the Pacific schemes of those 50,000 men and women that are sitting on the tarmac in many Pacific nations now, ready to come. But it's broader than agriculture. It can go into other industries. This is specifically for you, skilled, semi-skilled and unskilled workers. And Vietnam is the first country to sign up. And what an MOU is the implementation process. It's now up to Maurice Pine to sign the deeds with the approved employers and the labour hire companies that we've vetted to give them the go-ahead to walk into Vietnam and start bringing the workers in. It's nothing new, we've already identified them. So we're ready to go. It'll be a demand-driven process. This is important that we got this on the table. This is about delivering, not promising. And that's what today, and over the last 4 odd years that I've been Agriculture Minister, I didn't want to be promising the world. I wanted to leave a legacy. A legacy no matter what happens after the election, no matter whether I'm sitting in a chair or someone else is sitting in the chair. That the only legacy that I can stand by is one that no matter who comes after me, maintains the direction that I put in place. That's a legacy to me. That's a legacy to an industry that I love and live and worked no other place but in. I represent regional rural Australia, and can I say that the greatest professional honour that I've ever been given is to become your Agricultural Minister, to represent agriculture. Not for anything that I do, but just for everything you do. So on behalf of a grateful nation, for all you've done and all you will do, thank you. Bloody journal.
Thank you so much, Minister. Mr Littleproud has been kind enough to accept a question, this time from me, just before morning tea. Just on the ag visa, you've invited India to sign up. Why haven't you invited every other nation?
Yeah. So we are in bilaterals with 4 countries that we felt that we could get expedited access to. You've got to understand, while we put this in place on the 1st of October, these are sovereign countries. Just because Australia waltzes in and says, we've got an ag visa, we've got something for you, doesn't mean they have to accept it. And I've got to say, the biggest challenge that we've had in trying to get any country to sign up is the disgraceful actions of the AWU. Now, they walked in and spoke to embassies and ambassadors and told them not to allow their citizens to come to Australia because we would exploit them. No Australian organisation should do that to another Australian. We're better than that. That's the most disgraceful thing I've seen. And yes, there is a small cohort that does the wrong thing. And as Fiona said, we'll weed them out. In fact, we've got legislation with states to mirror to make sure we address that. But you don't demonise an Australian industry, your fellow Australians in that way. You trust your fellow Australians, you back your fellow Australians, and you fix it. So that's made a challenge. And so we will continue to expand those countries beyond the four, and Indonesia have already made it clear that they are one in which we are negotiating with. But we have invited India as part of the free trade agreement to participate in the ag visa. And so this is important. This is about making sure we get that right. And the countries that we do ask, not only at a geopolitical level, but at a local level, and understanding from peak bodies like the NFF, from AMIC, from the fishery and forestry industries, about what are those countries that'll shift the dial, that'll give you certainty. But the big piece in this that excites me, living in Western Queensland, this is the biggest structural shift in Australian agricultural workforce ever, because what we are doing is we're going to give a pathway to permanent residency. We're bringing the next generation of migrants to Australia. The next generation that want to live in regional Australia and want to be in agriculture. They'll have to do 4 years and then they'll have to stay for a further period. So we'll continue to expand to other countries as we can continue to have the bandwidth to be able to have those negotiations and to do that properly. But we'll do that in concert, not just in terms of a geopolitical sphere from us as a government, understanding some of the challenges, the security challenges we face, but also with industry. And that it is a diverse visa. And so it's not just the horticultural sector, it's not just the grain sector, it's actually the fisheries, it's the forestries, it's the meat sector. So we'll work through them, but the four that were identified straight up were the ones that we felt that we had already close immigration ties with that we could expedite.
Thank you, Minister. While we've got the time, let's cover off on another big issue, biosecurity. You talked a bit about it in your speech. Last week you described the NFF as being ignorant when it was referring to the money allocated to protecting Australia and the industry from lumpy skin disease. Do you think we need to be thinking about a new funding model for biosecurity, and is that something that you would consider going into the election?
Well, I don't know whether you heard my speech. There's one already in train, and that's around a cost recovery model. That's what we are moving towards. But not every industry has come through or out of COVID better than agriculture. There are industries and there are people that rely on their jobs for those industries to succeed, and many of them had to take this thing called JobKeeper to keep them going. And many of them are importers. And so what we had to do was understand that we had to be agile and not go towards a cost recovery model that would put more imposition on them. So they are cognizant of the fact that we will move towards a cost recovery model. That's how we operate, and they will be facing up to that, to the risk that they pose to Australian agriculture and to the environment. But let me just say that any decision we make on biosecurity shouldn't be from emotion, shouldn't be from the sidelines, it should be from science. And that's why I sent Mark Chip, the Chief Veterinary Officer, to Indonesia. And he's come back with a strategy that will not just be the responsibility of the federal government, the state governments, but also industry. We all have a role to play in this. But just saying you want to throw money at it without understanding what you're actually going to do with it doesn't actually shift the dial. I'm spending your money, and I'm going to spend it if the science tells me to spend it. Not just because a soundbite says that we should spend more money on biosecurity. When I've got the Inspector General of Biosecurity, who is independent of me and the department, when I question him, have they got the resources? If they don't, then I am negligent. I need to act. But if he tells me I've given them the resources, I've given them the money to be able to provide that surety to me, then it's up to the department to do it. But just to spend money for the sake of money is not what I'm going to do. I'm just a little bloke from Western Queensland with a Year 12 education, but I learnt the value of a dollar. And I'm not going to spend someone's dollar if I don't need to, but I'll spend every dollar I need to. And that's what we're doing. So while there's emotion in a lot of this, you've got to come back to science. And I don't have a science degree, but I'll take the advice of Mark Shipp, the Chief Veterinary Officer, over anyone else in this country. I'll back him to the hilt, and if he wants something, as I said to him yesterday, he'll get it.
And just one very final question, I promise. I heard you're off to Shepparton very soon. Are you worried you're going to lose Nichols?
We're worried we're going to lose every seat. That's how you operate. Look, it is an honour and a privilege to be in that building up the road. There's only about 1,500 people that ever get the honour to walk into that. And I can tell you, there is not a day that I don't sit in that I put my hand on those seats and just think, what a great country we live in. A bloke with no education from Western Queensland is sitting behind the Prime Minister of Australia. I get to make decisions, and nowhere else in the world could you do that. And that's one of the honours, and we should always be fierce custodians of that. So whatever happens between now and the 14th or 21st of May, it's been an honour. And I don't take it for granted. And every day I'm there to make a difference for you and regional Australia. And that's our job. And if you do that, then everything else takes care of itself.
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank David Littleproud.